make us all think. Today we're going to go deep. We got the questions we're going to talk about the questions they actually told us not to ask today. So if you're certain questions answered and can't go any further and maybe a little too religious or something, my suggestion is you maybe not want to watch this, and you're not going to be able to ever change my mind. Yeah, you can't do that to someone who's gone and expanded their minds and made us think. Anyways, let me talk about ancient memory, the guardians. We want to talk about the guardians and the forgotten stories of creation. So good morning, everyone. First of all, let's take a deep breath. And just let yourself arrive into this morning. You'll feel your body waking up. Feel the air around you. Feel the light, beginning to move through the room. Feel the breath in your chest. So before we rush into another day, before we even reach for the noise, before we let the world tell us what to think, what to fear, what to consume, and who we are supposed to even be, I want to ask a question. A question that humanity has even asked since the beginning of time. Why are we here? Not why are we here according to some one denomination, not why are we here according to a preacher on a stage, not why we are here according to one translation, or why we are here because of someone's new fad book out, not why are we here according to a system that tells us to stop questioning. But why are we here as conscious beings? Why are we here on this planet? Why do we carry memory? Why do we look into the stars and feel like we have forgotten something? Why do so many people have dreams, visions, strange inner knowing, and a feeling that reality may be larger than the story we were given? Why do ancient cultures across the world speak of water before creation, beings descending from heaven, guardians, watchers, giants, strange creatures, sacred knowledge, heavenly wheels even, fiery chariots and vine winds, floods, and humanity forgetting its origin even? Well, this morning, I am not asking you to trade one dogma for another. No, not at all. And I'm not asking you to blindly believe every claim you even hear online. I'm one who wants you to question, expand your mind. I don't even want you looking to me for anything. I'm not here to be some guide. I'm not going to be here forever. I'm not asking you to fear the unknown even. I'm asking you to become brave enough to ask the question we were trained to fear. Because the real prison is not mystery. The real prison is being taught that you are not allowed to question mystery. The real prison is being told that asking questions is dangerous. The real prison is being told that you must accept the version that was handed to you and never looked any deeper. Hello, danger. How's it going? But the truth does not panic when questioned. Truth does not fear investigation. Truth does not need to punish curiosity. See, truth does not need you to stop thinking either. So this morning, we are going to go into ancient memory. We are going to go into water, creation, guardians, Elohim, ancient texts, translations, theology, philosophy, science, nature, and the deep questions that humanity has carried for thousands of years. And I want to say this from the beginning. I do not claim to own the final answer. No. I do not claim that every story is literal, and I do not claim that every strange artifact is genuine, and I do not claim that every ancient symbol is a machine, but I refuse to pretend there is no question, and maybe that is where awakening begins. Not when we decide we know everything, but when we become honest enough to admit that the universe may be larger than the box we inherited. So take a breath. See, and I'm willing to ask the question. I want you to say this. I am willing to ask the question I was taught to fear. I am willing to ask the questions I was taught to fear. See, many of us were raised in a version of religion that gave us simple answers. There's one God, there is one story, there is one translation, there is one way to read the text, there is one way to be saved, and there is one way to understand creation. And if you question it, you are in danger. If you question it, you are rebellious. And if you question it, you are deceived. And if you question it, you are going against God. But let me ask you something. What kind of truth is afraid of questions? What kind of God is threatened by curiosity? What kind of faith becomes angry when people study history? And what kind of spirituality tells you to stop using your mind? Because faith that requires you to become afraid of inquiry is not building truth inside of you. It is building dependency. It is making you dependent on a preacher, dependent on an institution, dependent on a stage, dependent on someone else's interpretation. And the problem is not that teachers exist. Teachers can help us. Texts can help us. Communities can help us. Traditions can preserve wisdom. But the moment a teacher tells you that you have no right to discern, that you have no right to ask, that you have no right to study, that you have no right to seek direct understanding, that is when something has gone wrong. Because the ancient texts themselves are simple. The Bible is not one book. It is a library. It is a collection of stories, poems, visions, laws, songs, prophecies, genealogies, histories, letters, arguments, and mysteries written across centuries even. It has been copied by hand, translated into languages, interpreted by institutions, changed through different traditions of readings, studies by scholars, and debated by theologians, preserved by communities. And the Bible we hold in English today did not fall from heaven already translated. Someone chose words. Someone chose which manuscript to follow. Someone chose to interpret difficult phrases. Someone chose how to explain symbols. And someone chose how to make the ancient world fit into modern worlds. That does not mean every translation is evil. It does not mean all religion is a lie. It means that we must become awake readers. We must understand that translation is interpreted, and interpretation carries power. And when you translate a word, you make a choice. And when you choose one meaning over another, you make a choice. And when you teach people that your interpretation is the only possible meaning, you are no longer guiding people towards truth. And truth cannot be owned. I mean, let's talk about Elohim. The word Elohim is actual plural form. And that is not conspiracy. You can look it up. That is part of the Hebrew language. Elohim can refer to God, gods, divine beings, or spiritual beings, depending on context. Sometimes it speaks of the God of Israel, the singular language, and sometimes the text carries imagery of the divine council, heavenly hosts, sons of God, messengers, watchers, beings around the throne, and powers beyond ordinary humanity. And the ancient Hebrew word was more complex than simple versions. Many of us were taught from a stage there are divine councils, there are heavenly beings, there are watchers, there are messengers, there are stories of beings descending, and there are stories of giants, and there's stories of strange unions between heaven and earth. And there are stories of water, winds, wheels, fire, clouds, chariots, mountains, serpents, angels, guardians, and gates. And I am not saying every one of these things has only one meaning, you know. Some people interpret them as angels. Some people interpret them as symbolic languages. And some people see mythic memory. Some people see spiritual visions. And some people see divine beings as an ancient Near Eastern worldview. Some see non-human intelligence. Some see technology described by people who did not have modern language. The point is not that you must agree with one interpretation. The point is that you were probably taught that there were more. There is no more interpretation to explore. You were taught that the text was flat, simple, finished, settled, but it is not. It is ancient. It is layered. It is mysterious, and it has been carried through time by human hands. And every time we look more closely, we find more complexity. So when you hear someone say Elohim is only one simple thing, there is nothing more to study, well, then they're wrong. When they say you should not question the old story, remember this. The people who fear your questions may be afraid of where your questions will lead. And then let's talk about the waters. Across cultures, there are creation stories that begin with water, water before land, water before order, water before form, water before chaos, waters of possibility, waters of the deep. And in Genesis, the earth is described as formless and empty with darkness over the deep and the spirit or with breath, the wind, movement of God moving over the waters. And many people read this as a simple beginning. But others look at it as a deeper question. Why water? Why is the world not described as being made from nothing in the simple way we were taught? Why does the story begin with the deep waters? Why does order emerge through separation? Waters separate from the waters, light separated from darkness, day separated from night. Why does creation appear like a movement from chaos into form? See, when I passed and had my experiences, which I've had more than one experience of NDE, I had one experience where everything was water, womb. And something came and took and stirred the winds. What I would have, in that day and age, would have thought like what they said, but as one who saw it in the face of leaving this existence and seeing creation, what I experienced was things flying in, ships, moving the water, and forming land, and volcanoes bursting and forming land. See, across other traditions, we also find waters. We will find primordial oceans. We will find floods. We'll find beings rising from waters. We'll find creation begins in darkness and deep. We'll find stories of the sky and the earth being separated, and we find winds, breath, birds, wings, serpents, and creators bringing order to a world that was not yet ordered. You know, why is mythology in front of history in the books? Maybe mythology is part of history. Maybe these symbolic stories, maybe they are ways ancient people explain nature. Maybe they are memories of the flood, drought, oceans, and storms. Maybe they are spiritual visions. Maybe they are cultural echoes carried from one civilization to another. And maybe they are all these things. Gilgamesh is 1,000 years before the Bible. The guy built a boat to save from the giants. But see, there's stories all over the place, right? Humanity has always carried a memory of water, right? Humanity has always carried a memory of the beginning, and humanity has always carried a memory of something descending, separating, and shaping, forming, and creating. And perhaps the deeper question is not, can we prove every image literally? Perhaps the deeper question is, why has humanity never stopped telling this story? And why is it in every culture? Why do we still look at the ocean and feel something ancient? Why does water calm us? Why why do dreams of floods? Why do we talk about being reborn from water? Why do we return to water when we need healing? Maybe because water is more than water in the human mind. Maybe it is memory. Maybe it is origin. Maybe it is the place before the story. Maybe it is the reminder that we are not separate from the earth. The land itself teaches us that life rises from cycles. Water rises from falls. Water becomes a cloud. Clouds become rain. Rain becomes the river, and rivers become the ocean. And the earth is not dead. The earth is alive with movement, and we are a part of that movement. Now I want to speak about guardians, watchers, and beings, because ancient texts are full of them. The Bible has watchers. The book of Daniel speaks of watchers. The book of Enoch expands on watchers. And ancient stories speak of the beings descending from heaven. We find divine counsel, and we find guardians and figures, and we find cherubims, guardian Eden. We find angels at the gates, and we find heavenly armies, and we find wheels with wheels in Ezekiel, and we find fiery chariots, and we find clouds of glory. We find beings with strange faces, wings, eyes, forms, and people who have been trying to understand these texts for thousands of years. Some say these are symbols. Some say visions. Some say angels. Some say myths. Some say expressions of divine reality. And some say ancient people were describing something they did not have words for. Some say the text may preserve encounter with other beings. Technology begins even the normal understanding of their time. Again, I'm not here to force you into conclusion, but I am here to say that the questions are real, and that the mystery is real. There are theologians, scholars, engineers, researchers, and alternative historians who have actually looked at stories such as Ezekiel's wheel and asked whether the language could describe something, technology. Let me just put that they actually discovered something too. Check this out. Joseph Blumrich was an engineer who worked for NASA, right? And he actually wrote about Ezekiel's vision. And he interpreted the wheel and structure for possible craft. And he later developed and patented the omnidirectional wheel design, all from what the Ezekiel's dream was. And that does not prove Ezekiel saw a spacecraft, but it does make you question, maybe it is. It does not show ancient imagery, can provoke questions that go beyond the simple picture we're taught. And this is where we have to become mature seekers. Why would something like that? And then here's another thing that happened. I took some things from the Bible, turned them into, combined them all together, and even science said you couldn't, but yet you could with the way that it was described in the Bible, and was able to make a formula that helped many, many people, and even got studied by Pharma Canada, and they had to back out because they couldn't make anything to replicate it. So this is where we have to become mature seekers, mature people to ask the questions. We do not need to turn every mystery into final answer. We do not need to turn every strange story into being proof that my idea is correct. But neither do we need to mock people for asking questions, because ridicule is not research. Mockery is not wisdom. Blind dismissal is not intelligence. The truth is, humanity has discovered many things once called impossible. The earth was not the center of everything. The world was not flat. Germs existed before people could even see them. Atoms existed before people could even see them. Radio waves existed before people could hear them. And there are mysteries in the consciousness of the ocean, in space, in the ancient history, in the brain, in the body, and in the universe that we do not fully understand. So humility is required here, people. We don't have all the answers. The person who says, we know everything already, is not being scientific at all. Science itself is always questioning and never stops. Science is not a finished book. It is a method of asking better questions and going further. And spirituality is not supposed to be a finished book either. Spirituality is a willingness to encounter mystery without trying to control it. Now let's speak about the giants, strange beings, ancient cultures all over the world. They have stories of giants. The Bible has the Nephilim, that speaks of mighty men, of renowned sons of God, strange unions, and beings who do not fit nearly into the simple story we were given. Other cultures have their own giant traditions as well. There are stories of large beings, hybrids beings, guardians, sky people, serpents, people star beings, and creatures who move between worlds. You know, even in ancient texts and Revelations, it talks about the lion, the eagle, and the ox rising in human form. You wouldn't even know that to recognize them. Some of these stories may be myths, some may be symbolic, some may reflect ancient animals' bones found by people who did not even know that they were dinosaurs. Some may preserve culture, memory. Some may have been exaggerated over time, but it doesn't mean we'd stop digging. Some alleged artifacts have been misunderstood too. But that does not mean we stop asking the questions. It means we learn discernment. We learn to say, this is claimed, this is debated, this is historical reading, this is interpreted, this is a person's testimony, and this is not fully understood yet. And that is a healthier way of walking through mystery. Because the world wants us to to move between two extremes to another. Either believes nothing yet beyond approved stories, or believe everything without discernment. But truth does not live in either extremes. Truth asks us to become mature. Truth asks us to study. Truth asks us to read. And truth is not afraid by our questioning. Truth asks us to look at sources. And truth asks us to question our own bias. Truth asks us to stay open without becoming, gullible or anything that's like that. And truth, asks us to remain humble. And that is what I want for every person listening. I do not want you to become dependent on me, because this body could just go. I'm not here forever. And I'm not here to create some other religion. I'm here to get us to all think, to stir our minds, get us to go deeper. I don't want to trade one preacher for another either. I want you to become a seeker. Read the text, read different translations, read history, read archaeology, read theology, read science. Listen to ancient cultures and listen to indigenous voices and listen to the land and listen to your own body. Hold your own experiences with humility and become someone who can say this: I do not know everything, but I refuse to stop asking. And now let me tell you why this matters so much to me. In my near-death experience, I saw things that did not fit the framework I had been given. I saw a water world. I saw creation beings. I saw reality that felt larger than the simple version of religion I had inherited. And I'm not here to tell you that you have to make my experience your belief. I'm not here to force you to accept my experience as scientific proof either. But I will not pretend it did not happen to me. It changed me. It took away my old certainties, and it made me realize that the body, the name, the role, the fear, the religious system, the external validation, and the story I had been handed were not my full reality. And it made me understand that life is larger than the box. And that is why I teach, not to build a new religion, not to tell you that I have all the answers, not to make you, make myself special, but to invite you to question, invite you to look deeper, invite you to stop handing your mind over to people who need you afraid. Because fear is one of the oldest control systems humanity has ever known. Fear makes us small. Fear makes us obedient, and fear makes us stop asking questions. Fear makes us believe we need someone else to save us. Fear makes us consume. Fear makes us divided. Fear makes us forget who we are. But the person who becomes awake is harder to control. The person who learns to breathe is harder to control. And the person who learns to think is harder to control. And the person who returns to nature is harder to control. And the person who knows their worth is harder to control. The person who can sit in silence and the person who no longer needs every external system to tell them who they are is harder to control. And that is true awakening. Is not believing one new story, not collecting one more hidden fact, not trying to prove you are more awake than someone else. The The awakening is becoming free enough to live in the truth, free enough to ask, free enough to learn, free enough to change, free enough to love, and free enough to remain humble before mystery. And let's return to the question that began this morning. Why are we here? Maybe we are not here merely to repeat what we were told. Maybe we are here to awaken. Maybe we are here to remember. Maybe we're here to become conscious participants in life. Maybe we are here to move from fear into truth. And maybe we're here to ask the ancient stories, not as caged, but as invitations. But we are here, maybe we are here to stop worshiping the system that taught us to be small. And maybe we're here to understand that the divine is larger than every institution. And maybe we're here to stop separating science from mystery, faith from inquiry, body from spirit, land from human life, and self from creation. Maybe we are here to become better questioners. Maybe we are here to become people who can hold mystery without panic. Maybe we're here to become people who do not need to control every answer. Maybe we're here because to become people who can say reality may be bigger than what I was taught. And not be afraid. Just to take a breath and feel our bodies. Because remember, you are part of the mystery. And you have permission to change your mind. All right. So peace and love. We'll see you guys next time.